good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this. Just like to say hello and welcome back to the Hopeless Podcast. My name is Jason, and we've got Delphia with us again. Hello, Delphia. Welcome back.
Hello,
And
thank you.
Joseph.
Hi guys.
Welcome back, Joseph. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy that we're doing podcasts more frequently now, and we have better structure. So
It's good. Got a good structure. We were away for a couple of months. But yeah, it's good to have the team back, and we can discuss some really important issues and share some of our views with you. And we're just going to jump straight into our topic for today, which is a very exciting topic, and it is called An Increasingly Godless Society, ? And this is from the Australian Census, which took place, which was released recently. So it took place in 2021, and it was released just recently, last month. That is in June. So the 28th of June, the census was released, and it had some very interesting information on there. And before I share my screen, I just wanted to get your views, your thoughts on the topic. Is Australia an increasingly godless society? What do you think? Let's go with Joseph first.
with me, okay. Well, an increasing godless society. It depends, I think, because if you look globally, there is more Christians and Muslims combined than there are atheists. So
Okay.
I think when we dive in and we look closely at Australia, it could show differently. And whether it's a good thing or bad thing, I'm quite interested to discuss that a bit further, and why it's even important in the first place.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joseph. What about you, Delphia?
My thoughts on the topic. I think it's very interesting, and I do know that there's, like, when you do outreach work, you find a lot of people who don't really know that much about Christianity, religion, stuff like that. So, being Seventh Day Adventist Christian, I remember telling one lady, I go to church on Saturday, And she's like, are all churches starting to go to church on Saturday? I'm like, no, most of them aren't. It's just like, okay, for a lot of us, at least Christians, we know that the common day of worship is Sunday. And it's just like, you mustn't have been to church for a while. So there's a lot of just the times when someone says something to you and it's just like, I thought that was common knowledge between everyone that this is what happens. And then you find out that it isn't.
I suppose there is a difference between sort of religious or denominational illiteracy, I suppose. A lot of people probably don't know a lot about what's going on in the religious world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're godless, right? So here are some of the facts that it shows us from the Australian census. I'm just going to share my screen with you right now. And share. So based on the census, as I said, released on the 28th of the 6th, looked at religious diversity and some of the changes that are, and belief and attitudes, as you were talking about there, Delphia, that is reflected in Australia. So currently Christianity is the most common religion in Australia, as Joseph said. And that accounts for over 43% of people identify as being Christian. But this has been reduced from 50%. So what we're seeing here clearly is almost a 7% drop 7% drop since 2016. And that's probably the biggest drop has been. So in 2011, it was 61%, and that then went to 52%, and now it's at about 43.9%. So what we're
I
seeing
think
is a trend,
I
right?
there's a trend of like it's a downwards, but there's an interesting thought that just came to my mind is that I didn't think, I thought the atheist population well exceeded 70%. I would, if someone would ask me before
Yeah.
me not knowing this now, I would say about 70% of Australians about atheists. So considering, let's say round number, 50% of people in Australia are Christian, can you imagine 1 and 2 people just walking in the street, oh, hey, Christian brother, hey, sister, like, you know, like you wouldn't say that, like you wouldn't know if they're atheists or not. But this makes me wonder, it's like, why aren't we should be able to talk comfortably in public places about Christianity and God than thinking that we're a minority when in fact we were the majority, weren't we?
Yeah, I suppose, it's becoming less and less that we're able to do that, comfortably talk about that. And as Delphia said, even if you are a Christian, then people still don't know much about you as your denomination. So they might not know anything. What they do know is, well, if you're not Catholic or probably Anglican, which are two of the largest ones, then you probably won't, figure much on some of these other charts, basically. And so we see that fewer people were also reporting their religions as Christian, and more are reporting no religion. So what do you think about these facts from the census?
What about Delphia's thoughts?
Yes, Delphia.
More people saying no religion. I guess a lot of people nowadays, like that. Okay, how do I word this? Okay, my brain works, my mouth doesn't. Okay, so as I said, when you go out witnessing and stuff like that and talking to people, and you've got Christian material, it honestly feels like most of the people are not interested at all.
Yeah.
Either they've got their own religion and they're just like very closed about it, or if they've got no religion, a lot of them will still believe in God, but they're just like, I don't need anything else. Would you still call them godless? Because if you were to look at their lifestyle, it doesn't say godly. So like a lot of people, when you see them, it's just like, they're like, oh yeah, I believe in God, but like there's something else. They're just like a family member of ours, she's like, I believe in God, I don't believe in Jesus. And if you don't believe in Jesus, you don't believe in God, effectively.
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, you've got no religion who may believe in God, but what extent is that? Are we still godless?
I find people say the other way around. I believe in Jesus, but I don't believe in God, because they see Jesus as like all this lovey-dovey figure, and then God in the Old Testament burning nations and committing genocide and things like that. So there's a bit of a contrast.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. There are people that really look at God as being vengeful and unmerciful, and Jesus being loving and kind, and as a result, people are probably moving away from that kind of religion, probably want to find a different kind of religion, and I think it's hard really to sort of classify that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, because I've got another interesting question here that I wanted to ask him. How do you define then, God and society, in this sense? Because we're looking at godless society. How do you define a society, first of all? And then how do you define God? Because certain part of the society defines God in a different way.
I think, yeah, as you said, a lot of people have a messed up idea of who God is.
Mhm.
And like most people, like when they explain why they don't believe in God, first thing they say is because he rains hellfire on people, because he is a tyrant.
Mhm.
Just random things like that, where it's just like, okay, well, you don't have a very good picture of God. Like, you don't have that loving father who gave up his son to
Yeah.
die. Where a lot of people, they're just like, oh, Jesus is a nice one. I'm like, no, the father went through a lot as well. So God, I guess it would be a redefining of God in the community, where for me, God is loving and powerful. Yes, he does have justice,
Mm.
but that isn't tyranny or cruelty, you could say.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Joseph? How do you define society here in this sense, and how do you define God?
I think it's quite big topics, and
Mhm.
even just one of those, like defining God, I think that's already like a sermon in itself for like a pastor. But I think if you just look in the Bible says 1 John 4:18, God is love. So
Mhm.
it says there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. But
Yeah.
he who fears has not been made perfect in love.
Yeah.
And how can you be made perfect in love if the creator is not perfect in love in the first place?
True.
So it's circular reasoning saying, it's not circular reasoning, it's saying that, oh, God is not perfect, God is not perfect love because he does this and that and this and that. And because the Bible says that I am made perfect in love, that means the person who made me is
Mhm.
perfect in love.
All right.
Wow, that's a lot of
That's
perfect in
beautifully
love.
said.
Yeah, yeah.
That's beautifully said. And that's what Jesus came to show. Jesus came to show the world the picture of love that God is, to the point where he was willing to give up his only son, just that very famous John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave, love gives. And then God is willing to give us so much more that reveals his character. And another one, see, you got your hand up there, Delphia, but when Philip was asking Jesus to show us the Father, Jesus says, have I been so long with you, Philip, that you haven't seen that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself. He was there bringing the world back to himself. And that was the love of the Father, as has been shown through Christ. And so I believe this is the key attribute, but it's not only the only attribute of God. Love is there, but God is also just as well. That if a society becomes ungodly, there is obviously going to be something to pay. If your child becomes unruly and decides to steal or break the laws, your child is probably going to end up in prison, or probably worse, dead. And so God is the same. He's fair, but he's loving, and he's also just as well. Delphia.
Yeah. Something that is really interesting to note as well is that a lot of like the main people who go out, especially in Australia, and share
Mhm.
about God, so that being Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, the amount of times people just arc up at you because they think you're either one of those, and
Mhm.
then you go and talk to them about the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's just like, I remember talking to one guy about it, and he's like, yeah, the Mormons believe that, we're going to be up in heaven, we're going to become gods, and we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that. And it's just like, yeah, well, that's not what is in the Bible, is it? Anyway, and it's hard when that is being presented as the God of basically everyone's denomination, where now you go out and they're just like, the first thing that comes up is the beliefs of those two main groups. Not that I have anything personally against those two groups either, But whereas just like, stay away from me because you don't present that right picture. So whenever someone else comes up, it's just like they must be presenting the same picture. So that makes it hard where you've got the Christians as well who are painting a wrong picture of God, and then you're trying to put a right picture of God back again.
Yeah.
But then it's just like, no, you're probably the same as the others.
Yeah. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi who says that you're Christ I love, but you're Christians I don't. You know,
Yeah, I remember that quote from him.
and the Christians, they can really leave a bad impression on non-Christians per se, and those who are, you know, of other religions, and the main reason for that is not all of them are following the Christ that they claim, you know, to follow. Christians are supposed to be followers of Christ, right? Not all of them are following Christ, and that's probably one of the reasons why, you know, Mahatma Gandhi made a statement in, and I realized that we can all, you know, get caught in that web really, and because you're atheist, or because you put yourself down as no religion, people can still be good and still be godly, you know. And so I want to ask the question, and how does a society become godly then? Godless, you know, how does society become godless?
Before we dive too deep into that question, because I think that's a bit of a touchy subject, because like you said, Delphia, there's someone who comes to the door and there might be this side one-sided and they don't have the full picture completely yet. And then someone who knocks on the door might knock on the door, knock, 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 and then they hear the story, and then you hear the story of, well, the fella told me just before this, that, this, that. So then you come along and be this other one-sided to balance out that, without being dead on or what actually is, because you just want to tip the scales of what he was thinking originally into that favor. You know what I mean? So, like we say, like, oh, we walk down the road and then we see someone and that person is not living like a godly life. That kind of implies in a certain way that kind of like a workspace only focus. So I just had a Bible verse, and then we can continue a little bit. It was Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. So there's a great impression and weighing point on faith and grace, but also to keep in mind on the other side of the coin that you can't be like, oh, faith, and then do sin and do what Jesus wouldn't do, and then say, oh, forgive me, and then you go back into your ways again. Oh, and then I'll do it again because I know God will forgive me. So you're not coming from like genuine repentance. So there's that side. So if you are already saved through faith, you need to ask yourself, is this what Jesus would do? And need to become more like him. Because if you want to be like him, be perfect in love, you need to make sure that you're not contradicting yourself by your actions. That makes sense.
That's a complex way of looking at it. Actually, I think we've done another podcast episode, which is, you know, along those lines. But I think, in short, what Joseph is saying, we are saved by faith, right? We are saved by God's grace that he gives to us through the faith that we have. And there's nothing that we can do to sort of make ourselves, you know, right with God. But we're judged by our works. And so our works kind of show us of who we are, you know, whose children we are. If we're children of God, we're going to look like him, and we're going to behave and we're going to act like him. And this is the issue with Christianity, is because so many claim to be Christians, but they don't behave, but they don't act like Christ. And I myself sometimes fall into that category. And so someone might say, well, you know, I can see that you're a murderer. And that's not good. That's not a society that I want to live in. You know what I mean? So the question is, what sort of society do you want to live in? If everyone goes, well, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in the laws of God. The laws of God says, you know, I should not kill. but I feel like I need to kill a few people, you know, you know, that is a godless society. And once a society, I need to just highlight, existed in the Bible, and these people used to sacrifice their own children to some false deity, some false god. So they did have a god, right? But it wasn't the God that we believe in of the Bible. And so they put their children through the fires. And that for me is a big, yeah, it's a big no-no. And so I'm just going to put the question out again. So how do we know, like, you know, what a godless society is? How does a society become godless in that sense?
Sorry. I think how does a society become godless? I think nowadays it sounds kind of stating like I'm stating the obvious, but God has been taken out of everything. They don't want to step on people's toes, as you're saying. There's a moral law, and everyone's just like, but they need to have their individuality. They need to make their own decisions. They need to this, that, and the other, etc. And there was an interesting quote that I saw. I don't have it right here. Oh yeah, I've got it now. And it's just an illustration of what's happening. And it's got, dear God, why do you allow so much violence in our schools? Signed, a concerned student. Dear concerned student, I'm not allowed in the schools, God. And I think, like, we can see that. I think we can all see that society isn't as nice. I don't know what word you'd use. It isn't what it used to be. There's more hate crime, more things going on. It's just like, how can people get like that? And it's because God has been taken away. And then they're just like, then they blame God. And they're like, why is God permitting all these things? And it's like, it's not God. You took him out. And you didn't want him there because he's got too many rules and restrictions, which were meant for your safety. But you've decided that it is touching too much on what you like, don't like, or what you do like. And you've gone and pushed him away. And now the results are coming and you're asking God what he's done.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great analogy, and thanks for bringing that up as well. You know, taking God out of things. We see God taken out of school, we see God taken out of the homes, marriages collapsing. We see God taken out of the mix when it comes to sort of parenting as well. You know, and so children now don't even have that respect that they used to have for their parent, because they don't honor their parent, like, you know, like the Bible says to honor your parent. And so this is the result. But on the flip side of that, we cannot sort of legalize godliness. Do you know what I mean? We cannot go to the courts and go, well, you know, maybe if the courts make a law that we should honor our parents, or maybe if the courts make a law that we should all these kind of things. We cannot bring the courts in to make laws to create a godly society, because godliness comes from within, right? It has to be a
from free choice.
It comes from
a free choice.
Free choice. You got to choose. You can't be mandated to choose to love. Do you know? You love me, otherwise I'm gonna put this gun to your head and blow your head out, blow your brains out. You know, that's not love, right? Love gives us free will. God gives us free will, and we have to choose to love through free will. Joseph?
Yes.
You wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. Is that as we were talking about our society is becoming a bit godless, something just popped into my brain. And I remember I was listening to a apologetic seminar by Rev. Zacharias a couple of years ago, and then it just flashed into my mind just now. And it was poem on secularization. So perhaps I can share my screen and read this out. So I got it here. And then I think it describes the way society is in an amazing way. So let me just share it here. Okay. Can see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, poem on secularization. So Ravi often recites this poem on secularization. So first, dentistry was painless, then bicycles was chainless, carriages were horseless, and many laws were enforceless. New cookery was fireless, telegraphy was wireless, cigars were nicotineless, and coffee was caffeineless. Soon oranges were seedless. The putting green was weedless. The college boy was hatless, and the proper diet fatless. New motor roads are dustless. The latest steel is rustless. Our tennis courts are sodless. Our new religion, godless. Painfully accurate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is painfully accurate, and I think it could be just a trend of how things are going in terms of in the whole great controversy thing. We know that there's an enemy of God who wants to see everyone disobey him and choose the path of destruction. And I believe that God will punish his children if they decide to go the opposite direction. And but that's the good thing about free will, though. You can choose if you want to live a life um, of peace and happiness, or you can choose to live a life of destruction. And I suppose one thing that I'm gathering from this podcast as well is it's all about free choice at the end of the day, right? I think this is the thing that's sort of floating to the top for me, is freedom of choice. Where do you want to end up? And I believe one such godless society was what we saw in the pre-flood era, time of Noah. The men were people living in that time were evil. As a matter of fact, the Bible says the thoughts of their heart was evil continually. And so God had to get rid of that generation because they were just up to no good. There was violence, and there were, just a degradation in society that never existed and probably hasn't existed until probably today. Could we be heading for, a similar condition to the time of Noah, where people's thoughts are evil continually? What do you think?
I would say definitely. Like, I don't know, it's just like I remember reading from some book where this lady from the 1800s, Ellen White, she was saying that back in her day, the newspapers would just filled with depressing stuff. It's like that was probably so uplifting for us now. Like if we read the newspapers from back in the 1800s, it would probably be like, oh, this is good compared to what we've got to look at now. And just the madness that has overtaken the world. I was talking to someone again this week, and he's like, he's getting sick of all the madness that's going on. No one can agree on stuff, and that you can't have your own choice. And if there is something that society desires, everyone's forced to do the same thing or to accept it at least. And it's society's gone mad.
And I think that's what we've seen in a lot of different places across the world. I was watching just a clip of what was happening in Papua New Guinea, and there were people just roaming the streets with machetes, and there's a lot of that. You find that when society begins to break down, we see riots, We see a lot of angry mobs, and in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of that's just like the beginning of what's happening here in society. We see the Black Lives Matter protest. That was pretty big, pretty angry, a lot of angry people. We saw what happened on January 6th, people storming the capital city in the United States. That has never happened before in United States history. And this could be just a sign of, what society can be when they reject God and they have a wrong concept of God. Because as we said, God is love, right? And his mission is to save us all. So the question is, how can a society find salvation then if it's trend that's going downward? How can that trend sort of, how can we turn that trend around? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've got a quote here again, and this quote says, "If we look at society today, if we look at the challenge of a country becoming more godless by the week, if we look at laws being passed that mock any form of morality, instead of lamenting and protesting, wouldn't it be better for us to plead with God to visit his people?" And I think this is our problem, is we don't look at it like this is a God problem. It's like people can sort it out themselves. It's a people problem, they can work it out. But I haven't seen anything get much better in the last couple of years. All the protesting,
No,
everything else, it hasn't gotten better.
no.
And that's because God is the one who needs to be called upon and asked to go and sort it out and get us out of this mess. If, there may be mercy for us still. And sorry, excuse me. I just really like that quote though, how it's like we need to go and start asking God to come back into our society.
Yeah.
And that starts with one or two people starting to pray. And then more and more people will come to knowing God, even though it sounds a bit far reaching.
Yeah.
Well, I say far reaching with 25 million people in Australia, but that's the amount of people that've got in one state in America. But like, God is wanting to do great things for us and show the world again what a godly society looks like.
Yeah. And you remind me of this Bible verse. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and turn away from the wicked and pray, I will hear their prayer and I will heal their land. Is the land in need of healing? There's another one in 1 Peter 4 verse 3, which says, the time past your life would have sufficed. You were in your evil deeds, as was the Gentiles, when we walk in the lust and excessiveness of wine, in banquetings and in worshiping abominable things. This is what like a godless society is like. And then in Colossians 3 verse 5, it says, but the key is to put away those sinful deeds, all these earthly evil that is lurking within you, have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. And this is a reason why God destroys these godless societies, because they are idolatrous societies, greedy, immoral, murderers, revelers, so God calls us to try and find a way back. And I think that's a great point that you made, Delphia. And Joseph, you got another point?
Yeah, another point. You did mention earlier, how about Noah, and will it get worse and worse and things like that? And I tend to agree with you on that point, is because I just had a thought. On top of Noah, there's a story of Lot and the how Sodom and
I
Gomorrah
forgot
was
about that.
destroyed like that. Yeah, so there was a few people there at the end of the story that came out. And then also in the book of Revelation, it talks about a few people will be saved in the end that are still alive. So the narrative goes that there's a few people, there's a few people, there's a few people at the end, there's a few people at the end. And that's the reality of the situation. And then that brought to me my attention like another point in Matthew 7:14, where it says, because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, but few there be that find it.
Narrow is the way. And I think sorry, Delphia, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just wanted to add there with what Joseph said about Sodom and Gomorrah. Was before it was destroyed, there was a point where God said that he was going to destroy it, and then people interceded. They went and pleaded with God to spare it, and they went from 100 people to 50 people to 20 people to 10 people to 5 people. If there were 5 people who were doing what was right in that big metropolis, please spare the city and the region round about. And if there had been as many as was needed, if there had been 5 people, it would have been spared. There was not 5 people. I think we've got a few more Christians than just 5 in the whole of Australia.
A few more than 5, but do we have 5% though? That was my question, because I thought, in 2011 it was 60%, in 2016 it was 50, now it's 40. The next census, which is going to be 2024, right? Is it going to be 30? And then after that, is it going to be 20? But the other thing I was thinking is, I mean, these are people who say that they're Christians, right? What if the true Christians, those who are actually living up to the best of their ability, they're using the grace of Christ, they're overcoming, they're not idolaters, they're not revelers, they're not sexually immoral, they're not, true Christians. What if it's less than 5% that's currently existing? Do you think that we've got to a time where, the evil is so much that God will say, well, I cannot even find 5% of good Christians here in Australia. I'm gonna have to destroy Australia. What if you cannot? And I take your point as well, Joseph. He's gonna save a remnant. There's gonna be a small proportion that will cling to what they believe is right, and they will do what is right, and they will be safe. But what can we do? How can we turn that proportion around, Joseph?
I had a point with that, is also, yes, there might be a remnant in the reality at the end, but God doesn't look at it that way. God looks at it the way as he doesn't want anyone to be lost. Not a single person. So it may be true, the reality of the situation, but all hope is not lost because of the title of the podcast, Hopeless Podcast. All hope has not been lost. So that's my message, kind of.
Wonderful. Now we can all be saved, to be quite honest. There was plenty of room in the ark to save people, and I believe it's the same. There's plenty of grace to be able to save us all as well. Okay, we're going to conclude on our final points. Let Joseph go first and just make his point, and then you can make your final point as well.
Well, this kind of ties into my wrapping up statement, but one of my thoughts that I've written down previously is, does it even matter that a society is godless? Like, God won't save a group. Say God, oh, there's a group there in Australia, I'll just pluck them. I don't care about America, I don't care about Europe, I don't care about Jamaica, I don't care about Papua New Guinea. I'm just going to grab this group because it's a group. Like, does it even matter that a society is becoming godless? At the end of the day, will your salvation depend on a group?
No, probably not. It'd be an individual thing, right?
That's right.
But I can see that, like it could be the case where one bad apple spoiled the bunch. And if the bunch of apples is becoming increasingly bad, then chances are you're not going to save many out of that bunch. It could destroy the whole bunch, really. Yeah.
I agree. I think I went to a prayer meeting and someone mentioned there's like, I don't know if it's written in the Bible or she made up this analogy, is that when you take one coal away from the fire, the whole fire is less hot.
But also that coal dies while the rest of them actually can keep warming each other. So there is a beauty in uniting with people, I suppose, who have got, similar beliefs as you, and together we can keep each other warm or hot. Any thoughts, Delphia?
Yeah, I like what I think it was Joseph, what he mentioned just before. God is not waiting for like that 5%, and then he's just like, oh yes, I can destroy the rest of Australia and just transplant these 5% into heaven. He's not wanting that. He wants the percentage to go up, not down. But there's mercy still. So I think there's that as well, and just I guess what was also said about us having the title of Hopeless Podcast. If we're a godless society, we're a hopeless society. So to go and have God, we have hope.
Exactly.
So,
And I was going to share this. I like this one in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17, where he says, we need to learn to do good and seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of the orphans, fight for the widows. This is what a godly society should look like, those who are doing good, that Jesus, he said Jesus went about doing good. Most of the day, people just greedy, people just looking after their selfish means. People are not seeking justice. There's so much injustice. People are being oppressed left, right, and center, and no one is actually looking out for people who are being oppressed, who are defending the orphans, who are fighting for the widows. That's a godly society. Joseph, your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, my final thoughts is, firstly, is that at the end of the day, it's up to us and an individual. We cannot hang on to our brother or sister's feet or toes so we can hitchhike our way to heaven when God comes. Salvation is independent and it's on you. So Matthew 7:14, because narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Because so that's kind of what I was trying to say there. And also, it's for grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourselves, but it is a gift from God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. So God's giving this free gift to anyone out there. So I kind of just want to wake up our listeners to say, hey, let's talk about God more, because there's more people that classify themselves as Christian that even I thought before doing this podcast, I thought there was less of us. So I feel more comfortable about saying, hey, do you believe in God? Hey, do you believe in Jesus? Or talk about that in more public places. And then lastly is, for we walk by faith and not by sight, in 2 Corinthians 5:7. And when you do talk about this to your friends, to your mates, maybe you don't know, there might be a stranger sitting behind you on the shopping center bench, and they might ears just what are they talking about? And they might get inspired to pick up their Bible that's been collecting dust on the shelf at home. So that's my message of love to everyone.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you very much, Delphia. It's been a great podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode. This podcast has been sponsored by the Avon Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church, and they've also got a prophetic seminar coming up in August. So you can jump on the website, you can register for this prophetic seminar. Jump on our Facebook page as well. You'll find a link there where you can register as well. And we want to thank you for watching. Those who are watching on YouTube, I want to thank you for listening. Those who are listening on Apple or Spotify, we are on all the major podcast channels, and want to say thank you and good night, good morning, wherever you are listening. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.